Hello everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, depends on the place you're attending. And I'm happy to host today and 3 days teleseminar. And right now we already have more than 180 people attending, and we are glad to have many people from all over the world. And but because of our time schedule, we have to choose 3 p.m. Oh, actually 2 in Thailand and 3 for Malaysia. And maybe not so bad for the Europeans, but not so good for America. It's yeah, very early morning. But anyway, we are happy to have 3 speakers today from a different perspective, from one person from FAO and one from EU and one from Thailand. So we can hear many information from their experience. So I would like to introduce our first speaker, but before that, I think we have time to accept question and answer at the end of talk. But this is first time I organize, so I'm not sure how much we can entertain. But please, any participant would like to have any questions, and just write it down on a Q&A session of the Zoom. Many computer you have in the bottom, and you can write it down. And we choose some of them, and we try to answer. And maybe first and second speaker may answer writing if you have time at the later of the session. But those questions will we summarize third day. We have discussion session, and we can use your question to summarize our discussion and way forward in ASEAN region. That's the thing I have to notify you before the seminar. And first speaker is Dr. Matthew Camilliel. Dr. Camilliel joined FAO in 2007, and he is currently the head of the fishing operations and technology branch within the organization. His responsibilities include the promotion and monitoring of the implementation of the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries and other international fisheries instruments, especially those aiming to combat IUU fishing. So, Dr. Camilliel, Matthew, are you here? Hello. Oh, we have to unmute.
Okay, okay now.
Okay, good. Okay.
Thank you.
You have the floor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Just shared my screen, so you should be seeing my presentation. Good morning to all, and it is really a pleasure for me to be addressing this teleseminar. I was looking forward to this seminar being organized in March, but I congratulate the SEAFDEC team for being able to organize this virtually. So yes, I'm pleased to be opening this panel with my presentation, and I've been asked to look at the perspectives on the initiatives of Southeast Asian region in fulfilling international requirements for combating IUU fishing. Now, we've all heard about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the international instruments and tools, and how do these link up? Well, under the Sustainable Development Goals, we know that SDG 14, life below water, there are two targets which specifically address IUU fishing. Target 14.4, to effectively regulate harvesting and end overfishing and illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. And also target 14.6, which relates to the prohibition of certain forms of subsidies which contribute to overcapacity overfishing and IUU fishing. And the way, the foundation for addressing and achieving these targets is in fact through the implementation of international fisheries instruments, mechanisms and tools. And we will be looking at these instruments with a focus on Southeast Asia. Under the SDG framework, there is actually an indicator which measures the progress in the degree of implementation of instruments to combat IUU fishing. And we've had two runs, 2018 and 2020. I must underline that the process for measuring this degree of implementation is through a self-assessment. So the questionnaires that the countries submit. You can see that on a worldwide level, out of a range from 0 to 5, 5 being the highest, well, in 2020, there's been an improvement over 2018 with a degree of implementation of level 4. For Eastern and Southeastern Asia, unfortunately, I do not have the breakdown for your particular sub-region, but there is a lot of encouragement there, because you can see that in 2020 there has been a registration of an implementation of level 5, that is the highest. But of course, this is all countries grouped together. And we will be looking in more detail at your sub-region and seeing where perhaps there should be more progress. In any case, you can see at the bottom of the screen that the least developed countries and the small island developing states are the ones that are struggling most, because on average, they have reached this implementation level of 3. Now, what are these international fisheries instruments? I'm sure that most of you are familiar with what we have available to us, starting from the Law of the Sea all the way through to 2018, when we had the last international instrument adopted, that is the voluntary guidance for marking of fishing gear. But you can see that we have actually 4 binding agreements that directly address either as a whole or parts of it combating IUU fishing. So from the Law of the Sea to the Compliance Agreement, the Fish Stocks Agreement, and the Agreement on Port State Measures. We don't have time to go into each one of these, but what's important to note and to remind ourselves that the flag, port, coastal, and market state responsibilities have been defined in these international instruments. And it's not enough just to adopt them, ratify them, but it's important to implement the provisions. And this is where the importance lies, in the implementation. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, we think of IUU fishing as being something that is done by others, by vessels flagged by other countries coming into our waters to steal our fish. But this is really not the case. Of course, that is one of the problems, but each state has to take up the responsibilities as a flag, port, coastal, and market state. Flag state responsibilities. Here on this slide, we have tried to just summarize these responsibilities in a simple manner. Every country that flags a vessel, authorizes a vessel to fish, has the obligation to monitor that the activities of that vessel, and to ensure that it is complying with the regulations set at international, regional, sub-regional, and national level. The port states have the obligation to make sure that it is not accepting foreign vessels into their port which have engaged in IUU fishing, and to take action if they have detected any illicit activity. Coastal states have the obligation to protect their zone. Yes, it is a right for states to extend and claim an exclusive economic zone under the law of the sea, but that comes with responsibilities and obligations to monitor that zone and to safeguard the resources within that zone. And therefore, in giving out authorizations to its own flag states and perhaps to vessels flagged by other states, it's important that there is sufficient monitoring. A market state has the obligation to make sure that it is not trading in fish that have been derived from IUU fishing. Now, one state can be all four of these states or not. And what is important is that there is information sharing and cooperation amongst the different states which are acting in their different roles at different times. So flag states and port states have to exchange information, for example, and the coastal state needs to cooperate with the port state when it is asking for information on the catches, for example, that are on board a fishing vessel that has come into its port that have been derived from the coastal state. So this is something that we should be looking at, and definitely entities like SEAFDEC do promote and facilitate this information sharing and cooperation. So combating IUU fishing requires, as we said, the flag, port, coastal and market states cooperation. It's not only about detecting IUU fishing. One can detect it, but if there's no action taken, then it is useless. So detecting IUU fishing through MCS is important, but it does not stop at MCS. It is important to have effective enforcement and effective action that is taken. The connection between IUU fishing and other crimes. Very often we have heard of fisheries crimes, for example, but we must distinguish between IUU fishing and the other crimes that are taking place within the fisheries sector. So IUU fishing, we know what that is, the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, but then there are crimes that are taking place on board a fishing vessel that are not necessarily IUU fishing, but are breaking other regulations. And those need to be, action needs to be taken in a different way. So you have document fraud, you may have labor crimes, health regulations that are broken, etc. But then there are other crimes that are taking place on board fishing vessels that have nothing to do with the fishing operation. So you have smuggling of drugs, smuggling of arms, human trafficking. The thing is that they need to be taken into consideration as a whole because they're taking place on board fishing vessels. And there are the different processes. Fisheries MCS, as we said, has that role to detect IUU fishing and then take effective action. But then there are other inspection and control schemes that need to take place to check on the other aspects on board fishing vessels, as we said, and then other control schemes to monitor human trafficking, drug trafficking, etc. The importance is that there is interagency coordination between the different processes that are dealing with focusing on IUU fishing and the other crimes that are taking place within the fisheries sector. Now, just to focus on the Port State Measures Agreement, the most recent binding agreement, well, this chart just goes to show you the popularity and the commitment that has been registered around the world, where you have the Port State Measures Agreement having the highest rate of adherence in the last 10 years when compared to other international instruments. So this is a very encouraging matter that countries have understood the effectiveness of the Port State Measures Agreement. The status of the PSMA, we have 66 parties around the world. You can see the blue shaded countries. They are filling up fast. The green shaded countries are just signatories. They have not become a full party. to the Four States Measures Agreement. And we hope that more countries will continue to join. The PSMA is being put into action. Meeting of the parties has taken place twice. The third one, unfortunately, had to be postponed to next year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are open-ended technical working groups dealing with information exchange, and I will address that later on in my presentation. And again, we are waiting for the third meeting to take place of this technical working group, probably next year. Then the Part 6 working group, established under Part 6 of the agreement, which deals with the requirements of developing states and the capacity development, again, which I will address later on. We were planning to organize 2 regional coordination meetings, one for Asia and the Pacific, this year in 2020. Unfortunately, we had to postpone these to 2021, and we hope that we can confirm some new dates. The plan is to have a coordination meeting within a region before the meeting of the parties takes place next May. So this will help the countries in the region prepare for the review meeting, which will take place next year. Now, focusing a bit on the Southeast Asian countries, parties to international agreements, I must explain that in addition to the SEAFDEC countries, we have considered here 4 other countries within the region, which we thought was relevant to include, but we have kept them separate. And that is China, North Korea, South Korea, and Timor-Leste, since it is a member of the RPOA IUU. So you can see here that we've got 7 out of the 11 SEAFDEC countries parties to the PSMA. Almost all 10 are parties to the Law of the Sea, 3 of the Compliance Agreement, 6 of Fish Stocks Agreement. And then on the chart here, we also have the Cape Town Agreement of the IMO, that is relates to safety of fishing vessels, which is very much linked to IUU fishing, and the ILO Convention of for decent work. And you can see that although it is in force, there is only one SEAFDEC country that has become a party to the ILO Convention on Working Conditions on Board Fishing Vessels. Now, this relates back to what I presented earlier on, that SDG indicators chart, whereby we saw that, yes, there appears to be, the responses from countries that there is a very good implementation of international instruments. However, when one looks at this chart, you can see that there is room for further commitment from countries to become parties to the international agreements. Of course, that does not mean that the provisions of that are included in international agreements are not being implemented by the countries, but becoming a party will underline their commitment towards the objectives of these agreements. Now, it's important to look at the regional fishery management organizations and other arrangements in the region, because these are mechanisms that help in the implementation of these international agreements at regional level, and perhaps also including some specific provisions and specific mechanisms that are applicable to the region. The membership is quite large. You can see here from the chart that SEAFDEC countries are not only involved as members in RFMOs that are closer to the region, IOTC, WCPFC, CCSBTs, COFA, which flank basically Southeast Asia, but also some are involved in RFMOs which are with their competence area, which is very far away from the region. So there are long distance fleets of some, you can see from the chart that the number of Southeast Asian countries that are involved in RFMOs further afield. On this chart, you can also see we've included APFIC. You know, APFIC is really an advisory body, so it does not take binding measures, and the membership is very high. 8 of the SEAFDEC countries are members of APFIC, and 8 of the SEAFDEC countries are members of the RPOA IUU. Now, you know that we have the International Plan of Action to combat IUU fishing. The RPOA IUU in the region is quite unique. There is now perhaps one in the making in the Caribbean region as well, but this is quite unique and has been effective. And of course, it would be important to have a national plan of action. And according to our records in FAO, it appears, because it's not always clear, and I appeal to countries to remind countries that they are encouraged to submit their national plan of action to FAO, including for us to be able to publish it on the website. So it appears that all the RPOA members have a national plan of action, and it appears to us that 9 of the SEAFDEC countries have a national plan of action, but that is according to our records, and we're not sure which has been updated or not. We are pleased to receive the news that Cambodia has just updated its national plan of action very, very recently, so we applaud them. Now, those RFMOs, this is a survey that we have conducted very recently. What are the conservation and management measures that are being put into place by these RFMOs? And in the first column, you can see, well, the second column there, percentage of RFMOs that adopted the CMMs. You have 15 CMMs there listed. You can see that all of them, that is the 13 RFMOs that responded to our survey, all of them have a record of fishing vessels, have IMO number requirements, have measures to take against vessels and nationals that have been engaging in IUU fishing, and the maintenance of an IUU vessels list. At the bottom of the scale, there are some weaknesses in trade-related measures, requirements of developing states are not always addressed, and catch documentation schemes only, well, less than a third have adopted catch documentation schemes. To the right, we have selected the 4 most important for the region RFMOs. IOTC have all of those CMMs in place. WCPFC, almost all except catch documentation schemes. And you can see the others have a lot of ticks, but there are some CMMs that have not been taken on board yet. So yes, the RFMOs are doing a lot of work, are being effective. And of course, they've got their own processes then to ensure that countries, that their members are fulfilling their obligations in accordance with the regulations that they set. So they've got their own compliance committees and processes to ensure implementation. Now, earlier in my presentation, I referred to the importance of information exchange between the different states, either as a port, flag, coastal, or market state. Now, the global information exchange systems that are being put in place by FAO are the following. Well, under the Port State Measures Agreement, information exchange is crucial, and the parties have called upon FAO to develop applications for countries to register their designated ports and to register their national contact points. In accordance with Articles 7 and 16, there are currently 432 designated ports around the world, and that's 72 from 3 Southeast Asia countries. So you can see that very few countries from the region have officially designated the ports on this, through this application. And this is a binding requirement for the parties to do so. So we encourage those who have not yet designated their ports through the app to do so as soon as possible. And there are 49 national contact points 6 are from Southeast Asia. Now, in the meantime, FAO is developing this global information exchange system under Article 15 and 16, which essentially will enable countries that are undertaking inspections in their ports to share that information and to share the results of every inspection on every vessel that enters their ports. The global record of fishing vessels, refrigerated transport vessels, and supply vessels, this has been around for some time. It was publicly launched in 2018, and this is the backbone supporting information exchange system, both for the implementation of the PSMA and other instruments to combat IUU fishing, because it provides a certified database whereby you can verify the identity of the vessel and the authorization of the vessel. That is, you are detecting maybe through MCS means or entering your port. It allows for risk analysis from the historical and compliance information that is available in the global record, the linkage between the vessel and the port state inspection information and results. It is open to parties and non-parties of international instruments, and it includes also other surveillance information. Now, what is important is that countries use this tool, and the more information that is provided there, the better informed countries are around the world to be able to take action. So these are the two global information exchange systems that really will form a very strong, potent tool to combat IUU fishing. The better information, the better placed you are to address IUU fishing. What's the status of the global record? Well, the global record has 64 countries contributing to it. Total number of vessels, 11,000, more than 11,000, and that means that it's more than a third of those vessels which currently have IMO numbers. Asia appears to be contributing quite a lot. There still needs to be more commitment from the region to submit more information on the vessels. But you can see that most of the vessels included come from Europe and North America. The vessel types, it's not only fishing vessels, as the title of the global record implies. There are transport vessels as well, because it's not only fishing vessels that are engaging in IUU fishing, but also the carrier vessels and the supply vessels that contribute to supporting IUU fishing. The vessel sizes, there are those which are bigger than 24 meters, and then there are the smaller ones between 24 and 18, and also below 18 meters. So it includes all sizes of fishing vessels. Looking at Southeast Asia, and here I've put up the contributions of the countries in the Southeast Asian region to see what information we have there. With most vessels coming from China, we've got Indonesia, quite a significant amount of vessels, Philippines, Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Thailand. On the right-hand side, you can see the red bar chart, you can see the percentage of data fields that are provided. There's a minimum requirement of 5 data fields that need to be provided, basic ones, out of which is one of the crucial ones is the IMO number. Without the IMO number, the vessel cannot be uploaded into the database, because that is the unique identifier which is crucial for monitoring that vessel in different databases as it goes around the world. Now, this is just an image. We don't need to go into detail of of what the global information exchange system of the PSMA and the global record would look like. What is important, the take-home message from this is that the global record and the PSMA global information exchange system will be connected in some way. The PSMA information system requires that certified information on the identity of the vessel, which comes from the global record, and these will be connected. Information in both the global record and the PSMA global information exchange system would be able to be uploaded through the national system in a manual or automatic fashion, or through the regional vessel information systems. We know that, for example, IOTC already has a PSMA information exchange system, and to alleviate the pressure on countries to submit to both systems, we will look at connecting the regional systems with the global system. Coming to the end part of my presentation, capacity development, which is crucial. We saw in the first chart, the SDGs chart, where the developing states and small island developing states are struggling with the implementation. And clearly that is because more capacity development is required. And it is not only capacity development in the terms of training of inspectors. You need to have the robust policy and legislation in place for the inspectors to be able to do their job. And you need to have a well-trained team of inspectors, sufficient number of inspectors to do what the legislation says. And you need to have the proper institutional setup and capacity and resources and interagency coordination to be able to implement the international instruments, the minimum requirements under international instruments and the regional regulations. So this is why these three elements for capacity development are taken very seriously by FAO and are developed together, not in isolation. So around the world, FAO is supporting 42 countries over the last 3-4 years. You can see that the Southeast Asian region is a priority area. And just to focus in a bit on your region, these are the countries that we have been supporting: Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, and Thailand. We have done most work in Indonesia, but we've done considerable amount of work in policy and legislation for Cambodia, in Indonesia and Malaysia. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there's a work plan for follow-up support in Cambodia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. It's not that the others we have not, we have excluded from our priority list. We still need to re-engage, especially after this pandemic period. So we are committed through this global program we have to support countries to continue to support the region as necessary. The way forward. Well, the way forward, the fundamental elements to eliminate IUU fishing, just to recap, are cooperation amongst the countries. No state can act alone in taking action, in information exchange, in making sure that there is compliance with regional agreement, taking decisions together to set some regional standards. Transparency, be open, not only in sharing information, but sharing plans and strategies. And the compliance, it's not enough to have regulations put on paper, but it is important to ensure the monitoring of the compliance of those decisions that have been taken. Challenges are numerous. There is need for more the stronger political will, operational implementation and enforcement, capacity development needs, as we said, interagency coordination. It's not only about fisheries, but it's about fisheries working with customs, working with the maritime sector, with the police, with all the agencies that in some way or other are connected to the fishing industry. And of course, the new challenges that we have with the COVID-19 impacts on monitoring, control, surveillance, market, economic development, political dynamics, and the priorities. The next critical steps from the FAO perspective, from the global perspective, is the development of that PSMA Global Information Exchange System and the links to the existing regional systems, which is very important. And therefore, it is in this sense that FAO has engaged very closely with SEAFDEC in recent years, for example, in the development of the regional fishing vessel register to get it in line with the international requirements. But we look forward also to looking into other aspects of information exchange under the PSMA. International standards for the regulation, control, and monitoring on transshipment practices. We know that transshipment in itself is not necessarily a problem, but if it is not monitored and not regulated, that is one avenue which IUU fishing perpetrators like to use, transshipment, to be able to launder the IUU caught fish. And finally, the strengthened regional and global information sharing networks and cooperation, that is further strengthening entities like SEAFDEC, RPOA, IUU, and other networks that you have, both even at a bilateral level between the states, to be able to face and effectively together challenge and combat IUU fishing. Finally, I leave you with this information that FAO has one overarching website on IUU fishing and one dedicated to PSMA and global record, where you may find other information that you should find interesting, and we try to keep these up to date, and I will be happy to take questions now or even after this, this seminar. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Camille. And your presentation is clear. Some area, ASEAN region, a bit behind Port State Major Agreement, but yeah, we have information exchange, and some country can share their experience, and we working on this topic also. Anyway, I have a couple of people have write on the chat, but I may ask you. And earlier presentation, you showed the indicators by FAO, and some 2018 score is higher than 2020 score. I thought 2020 score always higher than 2018 score. The indicators score was some of them was higher. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, some countries, yeah, New Zealand, Oceania excluding, but Oceania and 2018 score is higher than 2020 score. Could you explain the reason and for this? Dr. Camilleri, could you answer the question? You may need to unmute. Matthew, could you unmute?
Okay, now,
yeah.
Yes, I was waiting for you to give me the permission to unmute, because sorry. I cannot do it on my side. So I will share my screen again. And I think this is the slide you have been referring to. Um, 2018 is orange, and 2020 is the green. So there has been, yes, in, for example, Oceania, I think this is, and Sub-Saharan Africa, in 2018, there was an average which was higher than that registered for 2020. So there was a regression. Now, of course, these are averages. So this could mean it's because that the reason could be that there are more countries that have been submitting information in 2020, and that brought down the average. So that is the case. But in the Eastern and Southeastern Asia, there has been progress from level 4, which is the orange bar there, 2018, to 2020 level 5. I hope that answers the question, and I'm happy to take more questions if necessary.
Okay, thank you. And so maybe another question from the Faith Patati, and he's asking RFMO things. WCPFC didn't have a catch documentation scheme, and but they have observers on board things. Isn't that a kind of catch documentation scheme that she's asking?
Okay, so I must emphasize that the information that is being presented here has been submitted by the secretariats of the respective RFMOs. So the secretary of WCPFC has informed us that there's no catch documentation scheme. Now, observer on board is what it is. It is observing on board. Yes, one can write reports, but what we mean here by catch documentation schemes are the document that follows the catch, the fish, from the sea to the plate, we say. So there needs to be systems put in place. You know, we have the International Voluntary Guidelines for Catch Documentation Schemes that has been adopted. It is one of the international instruments that I referred to in my opening slide. And I invite the person who asked the question to refer to these international guidelines on catch documentation schemes, which will give you an overview of what that really constitutes. Because there are different steps in the value chain that would certify that catch to make sure that every step of the way in the trading of that fish, from the catching to the landing to the trading or transshipment, whatever, the fish are accompanied by a document that certifies the origin of the catch and that it has been taken to, in compliance with conservation and management measures. And some countries have their own systems in place. The importing countries, like big regions like the European Union, for example, require a catch documentation scheme to be in place before they can import the catches from third countries. But I'm sure the other panelists will be referring to this in the next presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. And time is running out. And the final question is from Dr. Warabit. And what is the most prioritized area in ASEAN to combat IUU fishing from your experience?
Yes, well, I think that this final slide applies to answering this question. I think it is just building on the good that already exists, on the cooperation, the good cooperation that exists in the region, not only in exchanging information, networking, having joint training schemes, but really cooperating in taking effective action. Many times we're detecting IUU fishing, yes, and that is very good, it's very important. Many times we are training inspectors, we are improving legislation, we're having plans of action put in place. But if they are not completely implemented, and that is not to be seen only to implement, but to then take action if something illicit is detected, then that is going to be a problem. So there needs to be effective, and it has to be proportionate. One cannot get a very small fine for something very big, for I don't know, IUU caught fish that are worth $10 million, and one gets a fine of $1,000. Of course, that's not effective action. But of course, the other way around is also applicable. One must not have too severe actions taken if it is a minor infraction. So these are things that can only be developed in the region, in cooperation. Even what kind of action is taken, it has to be something more standardized. And also this idea of the bad guys are not only the others. We need to make sure that, you know, the states need to make sure that they are also monitoring their own fleets. And yes, why not? If their vessels are visiting ports of other states, to cooperate with the port states where the vessels are visiting, and ask them to check and control their own vessels. So this is what we mean by cooperation and transparency, helping each other to understand what your own fleet is doing and what the fleet of others are doing. So this is, I think, so in summary, the mechanisms are in place, the instruments are in place, the entities are in place like SEAFDEC to facilitate this process. The RPOA IUU is in place, but it just needs that step up to effectively implement and to effectively take action.
Thank you very much, and a very good suggestion. And we have to discuss more about cooperation, and I asked SEAFDEC to discuss this issue. And Dr. Kamiria, thank you very much.